Now, from Afghanistan, we move to the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, where I'm delighted to be joined by U.S. Army Colonel Ryan Dillon, spokesman for the Combined Joint Task Force, Operation Inherent Resolve. Colonel Dillon, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us with you again on your show.
It's such a pleasure for me. Let's begin with a brief situational assessment on the ground. How significant are the remaining pockets of ISIS in Iraq, and how much territory has yet to be liberated in Syria?
Well, first off, I just want to make a very clear clarification that there are no longer pockets of ISIS in Iraq. The black flag of ISIS no longer flies over any territory, any village, or any city in Iraq. There are remnants, there are tatters of ISIS that still remain, and they are largely in vast rural desert areas. And the Iraqi security forces are continuing to aggressively pursue these remnants so that they cannot reorganize and become relevant again.
All right, and in Syria?
And then in Syria, there are two locations where ISIS still hold territory in the middle Euphrates River Valley. Just north of Abu Kamal along the Euphrates River on the east side, and then further to the east towards the Iraq-Syria border. They have been contained to these particular locations, and the coalition with our partners, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are continuing to, where we can, pressure them, cause them to react so that we can strike them, and then continue to push and retake these areas as well. And when that is done, all of the territory that ISIS once held will have been retaken by Syrians and Iraqis.
Let's move on to soft power beyond the combat operations and the training mission. What are the coalition's goals to use this soft power to stabilize the area and prevent the reemergence of ISIS in both theaters?
Well, that's a great question, and for those of us who are wearing this uniform and this patch representing the military efforts, that is just one aspect of the overall whole of government and the greater coalition contributions to making sure that ISIS cannot resurge and come back. And some of those soft power things that you had asked about include stabilization, which is really a large piece of this. And that is from contributions monetarily to the government of Iraq through the United Nations Development Program. And so a lot of these essential services stabilization efforts are in a lot of ways some of those things. Now, there's also a very large issue and challenge of removing all of the mines and booby traps and IEDs that were left behind by ISIS. And that is something through these stabilization efforts, through some of these foreign ministries that are addressing those challenges so that you can get rid of them, and then we can get essential services turned back on, schools open again, and government offices up and running.
Well, what tools are in place? What processes are you following to prevent remnants of ISIS from coming back and regrouping under disguise?
Well, the Iraqi security forces, and I talk about them at writ large, have play roles in preventing a resurgence of ISIS. And so we'll look at just the country of Iraq itself. The coalition is proud to have trained more than 140,000 Iraqi security force members, and that includes border security forces. So they are out there preventing, those remnants of ISIS that continue to hold territory in Syria from moving in and around. Then you have federal police, you have Iraqi army, have checkpoints throughout, local police, and counterterrorism services to be able to react to, after identifying through intelligence these threats, and be able to conduct operations to kill these ISIS elements or conduct raids to detain them before they become problems to the population centers.
Colonel, what about these Iranian-backed PMF forces in Iraq? And are they going to? I've been hearing reports that the government is actually trying to institutionalize and pass a law that will allow them to become a separate institution within the security apparatus there. Can you enlighten us?
Yes. First off, I just want to make it very clear that there's people tend to put together popular mobilization forces and Iranian-backed, and they're not synonymous with one another. There are undisciplined groups within the popular mobilization forces that are backed by Iran, but the thing is that writ large, the popular mobilization forces did come to the savior of Iraq to stop ISIS when they showed up outside of Baghdad in 2014. So this is very much an Iraqi call, and go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Colonel, you can understand the skepticism, especially here in Israel, of the influence of Iran in the fight, but particularly after the fight. The elections are coming up. How influential can these PMF be in deciding the next parliamentary elections?
Well, I mean, everyone is jockeying for position in the lead up to these elections. The one thing that we can say as a coalition, as a combined joint task force, is that we do not work with any elements of the PMF, and there's very strict vetting processes for those who we can work with. So you cannot be affiliated with the government of Iran or with a terrorist organization, and you must not have any kind of ties or not affiliations, but any kind of background or history of human rights abuses. That automatically, any of those three things automatically prevents us by law to work with and or provide any support to an organization within the Iraqi security forces.
Colonel, please stay with us. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with Colonel Ryan Dillon from Baghdad. Stay with us. Welcome back. For our continued discussion with Colonel Ryan Dillon, spokesman for the Combined Joint Task Force, Operation Inherent Resolve. Colonel, I wanted to ask you about this phenomenon last summer in Iraq and Syria. The Regional Council seemed to pardon, I don't know how many, 100-plus members of ISIS, gave them the benefit of the doubt that they pledged allegiance under duress. Is this the recipe, this kind of forgiveness and reconciliation that's important to stabilization operations, or is this a threat?
Well, I think first off, we got to look at exactly how we are operating in both Iraq and Syria, and that is by, with, and through our partners. But to immediately address your question, when ISIS came into these areas, you had, number one, very hardcore ISIS fighters that are from Iraq and Syria. You had the hardcore fighters that were foreign terrorists and came in from outside. And then you also had a large part of the population that was compelled, by just the choice of being able to live or die, because if you did not follow or fall underneath ISIS, then you could very well find yourself dead. And so a lot of those that fell under ISIS really were not hardcore and had to do so just for survival. So we leave it to the local Syrians who know the people from their areas to make these decisions, and that's really how this has gone, by, with, and through our partners.
Now, Colonel, we have to end on Turkey. What is going on with, is there a need for the coalition to actually deconflict with a coalition partner with regard to its threats vis-a-vis Manbij in Syria and on across the Iraqi border?
Well, we continue to coordinate with Turkey. They're a NATO ally, and they are a coalition partner. And so they have LNOs that sit within our headquarters. We have LNOs that are in Turkey that are working directly with our Turkish military. Yep, for our liaison officers.
Continue.
And so So these dialogues and transparency in knowing what each other is doing is going to be continually important as we really look to continue the focus on remaining and rooting out the final elements of ISIS in that two areas in the Middle Euphrates River Valley.
Colonel Ryan Dillon, thank you so much for your time. Be safe.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us on again.